Quickly, I'm Emily Gardner. I'm the Senior Program Campus Public Manager here at the MIT List Visual Arts Center. And as part of that role, I get the great pleasure of being able to organize the biennial Max Wasserman Forum. So this year, our iteration is Visions of Sustainability. And we've been able to bring together several different artists from across the country, even around the world, to really think through different ways and modes of thinking and thoughtfulness with visions of sustainability, and what's the climate dialogue really pushed through within the arts. And so really thinking about like what are visual artists thinking about, what are their curiosities, and what are those thoughts. And so I really welcome all of them here today for all of those things. And so we'll do our different panel introductions, and hopefully you all be able to join us for different portions, or if not the full day, but we will keep you well fed. I promise. I'd like to note quickly that there are restrooms at the top of the stairs behind the elevators. I know it looks a little strange. We have one elevator working while one's under construction, but under the exit sign there's the restrooms. And I'd also like to invite everybody to please silence their cell phones during the panel's instructions, and then please step out if you have to use them. So this year's iteration of the Wasserman could not have been done without the huge help of a lot of my colleagues here at the List Visual Arts Center. So I'd just like to take a moment to thank them, including Cassidy Westjohn, who is our public programs coordinator, and she works very closely with me in support of the organization of this event. Zach Wynn, whose thoughtful contributions to the development of this year's topic in relation to how visual arts have contributed and to the climate dialogue. And I also want to thank my colleagues Elise Kuzik, Chris Hoodlet, Gwyneth Kokoven, and they contributed the back-end logistics and marketing of this event. And of course, my colleagues Kristen Warwick, Natalie Bell, and Director Paul Hoff for their support of this event, who are also joining us here today. I want to thank the speakers, of course, for coming in from all over and participating in today's event, and the many hours spent preparing their talks and the thoughtful discussions that have led up to today's events, and for their thoughts and curiosity and work as artists and educators and their scholarship. I am very deeply grateful. So this year, our forum topic on climate dialogue will kind of conclude with a keynote event this evening with Turquoise Dyson, and then have a wine reception this afternoon. But we also have lunch being served between this panel and the second panel. So I invite you all to please feel welcome, and hopefully our hospitality extends to you throughout the day. With that, I would like to invite my colleague Cassidy Westjohn to the stage, so she'll introduce this first panel. But thank you all.
All right, hi everyone. Thank you, Emily, for your introduction to this 2025 Max Wasserman Forum, and thank you everyone for spending your Saturday here with us. My name is Cassidy Westjohn, and I'm the Public Programs Coordinator here at the List Visual Arts Center. On behalf of the List Center, we're grateful to everyone here today for what promises to be an excellent suite of panels and a keynote address. With that said, I'm happy to introduce the first panel of this event, Human Traces. How have artists navigated landscapes of extraction and ecologies of displacement? The practices represented on this panel consider environmental change within longer histories of colonialism, capitalism, and human effects on our physical environment. Looking at cultural systems and structures, they map the violence of enclosure and dispossession, but also propose a renewal of ethical lifeways, paths to reparation, repatriation, and collective survival. The artists you'll hear from today include Adam Khalil, a member of the Ojibwe tribe, a filmmaker and artist from Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, whose practice attempts to subvert traditional forms of image making through humor, relation, and transgression. Khalil is a core contributor to New Red Order and a co-founder of Cousins Collective. Khalil's work has been exhibited at the Museum of Modern Art, New York, Sundance Film Festival, Walker Art Center, Minneapolis, Lincoln Center, New York, Tate Modern, London, Haus der Kulturen der Welt in Berlin, Museum of Contemporary Art in Detroit, Toronto Biennial of 2019, and the Whitney Biennial of 2019, among others. Next, we have Lon Tuazon, a sculptor who creates tools and installation test sites for climate futures. Tuazon was the 2024 Rome Prize Fellow in the Terra Foundation Fellowship at the American Academy in Rome, and has had residencies at the Civitella Ranieri in Italy and the Academy Schloss Solitude in Germany. She's had solo exhibitions at the Brooklyn Museum in New York, Hyde Park Art Center in Chicago, Visual Arts Center in Richmond, Virginia, and Storefront for Art and Architecture in New York. She is an associate professor at the School of the Art Institute of Chicago with an MFA from Yale University and a BA from Cooper Union. Next, we have Nida Sinnokrot, an artist and associate professor in the program in art, culture, and technology at MIT. His work critically interrogates the embedded power structures within dominant narrative frameworks and articulations of time and space. His practice challenges modernist paradigms from cinematic perception to industrial agriculture, revealing the violence of monoculture and the dissonance between productivity and ecological harmony. A recipient of the Open Society Foundation's Soros Arts Fellowship, Sinnokrot is the co-founder of Sakia, Art Science Agriculture, an alternative pedagogical platform integrating indigenous ecological knowledge within contemporary art, fostering decolonial approaches to sustainability and cultural memory. And last but not least, the moderator of the discussion is Sarah Montross, a museum director and chief curator of De Cordova Sculpture Park and Museum, which is part of the Trustees, a nonprofit land conservation and preservation organization. Montross directs the arts program at De Cordova with a focus on environment, land, and climate, and works with curators and artists on land-based commissions across Massachusetts. She's recognized for exhibitions and publications, including Jeffrey Gibson, Infinite Indigenous Queer Love of 2022, and Visionary New England of 2021, and for new commissions and outdoor installations such as Hugh Hayden's Huff and a Puff 2023. She earned her PhD in art history from the Institute of Fine Art at New York University. And with that, I will now hand it over to our panel. Thank you so much.
Hi. Ani Bojo, Shingwak Indishnakas, Baoting and Donjiba. My name is Adam Khalil. I'm a filmmaker and artist from what's currently called Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, and a member of the Sault Ste. Marie tribe of Chippewa Indians. I want to acknowledge that I currently live and occupy on the traditional homelands of the Vikings or Norse people after relocating to Denmark a couple years ago. That was a joke. All right. I'm also a core contributor alongside my brother Zach and dear friend and collaborator Jackson Paulus to New Red Order. Shameless plug, we're going to be part of the Boston Public Art Triennial opening on May 20th. Yeah. All right. So, yeah. Yeah. New Red Order is a public secret society of rotating membership that works to rechannel desires for indigeneity towards indigenous futures and agency. As a public secret society, as opposed to a secret society, everyone here is welcome to join. You can call toll-free at 1-888-NEW-RED-1, but hopefully during one of the breaks, or sign up at newredorder.org. I'm excited to talk to you this morning about New Red Order, or NRO's Give It Back program, which helps non-Indigenous people become accomplices in the Land Back movement.
So this is the right thing to do. It absolutely is the right thing to do. It's always been the right thing to do. So I move that we authorize the mayor to sign the agreement to transfer APN 405-001 to the Wiyot tribe and authorize the mayor to sign the grant deed to complete the transfer.
When this happened, I think the emotions and depth of feelings and the range of emotions were really intense. She basically talked to me about the building and the desire they had to transfer the ownership of the building. I was shocked. It was truly unexpected. So that's how it started.
So this for me is personal. It's very important. And I'm grateful that we're all doing the right thing, and I'm just thankful so much that all of you are out here. Thank you.
Yes, abolition is kind of like intoxicating. The process of like getting there, wow, it really has a lot of feelings.
In the last few years, the land back movement has entered the zeitgeist as Indigenous people continue to assert their sovereignty in the face of settler colonial alienation. Beyond the necessary disruption of taking back land, New Red Order's Give It Back program investigates, promotes, and presents actualized gestures of land being voluntarily released to Indigenous people. In the past decade, there's been an exponential growth in the number of settlers who have voluntarily given land back to Indigenous people, and we'd like to introduce you to some of them now.
I'm Kim Burgell, and I am the mayor of Eureka.
My name is Flynn Jameson. I'm an artist.
My name is Natalie Arroyo, and I am a Eureka City Council person.
Hi, I'm Christine Sleater. I am a retired faculty member from California State University, Monterey Bay.
Coming from all walks of life, each one of these brave settlers possesses an innate drive to do something about the state of reality. And what better way to shape reality than through realty?
Our pilot program participants, affectionately referred to as Give It Backers, are accomplices in one of the greatest crimes against reality, the repatriation of all Indigenous land and life.
It is possible to give land back, and this is a way of doing it.
The idea of selling land is something that actually should be reimagined.
We don't do real estate. We make real estate do better.
If you want something and it's the right thing to do, you can make it happen.
Operationalize your property to materialize the process.
I really have valued that shift of ownership and identity.
Exceptional theft deserves an exceptional return.
We talk a lot about equity and reparations, and yet there's not enough attention paid to what is truly the original sin, the genocide of our Indigenous people.
And it doesn't make you a bad person because of whatever your ancestors did or didn't do. The question is more what you're going to do.
In our introductory video, Give It Back, you can receive expert advice and best practices on how to begin your repatriation journey from people who've actually been through the process. So what are you waiting for? Get in on the ground floor of a growing and vibrant movement and become a Give It Backer today.
It is but a means to start the process and is by no means comprehensive. Pursue material decolonization at your own risk. Any advice or guidance offered by New Red Order in this introductory video should not be viewed as a substitute for Indigenous consultation or legal advice. For additional inquiries and guidance how to continue your repatriation journey, reach out to 188 New Red 1 or sign up for more information at newredorder.org.
You may have heard of our flagship Give It Back program when we rolled it out in 2023 via collaboration with Creative Time at the World's Unfair. Across an immersive spectacle of animatronics, large-scale sculptures, video installations, and powwow grounds, the World's Unfair invited the public into an empty lot in what's currently called Long Island City, Queens, to promote, normalize, and enact material change via the simple act of giving it back. As animatronic trees and beavers engaged in a dialogic about the origin of private property, multiple video monitors introduced the public to our pilot program participants, the aforementioned Give It Backers. The World's Unfair featured the first ever Give It Back gathering, bringing settlers who have gone through the process of land return in conversation with each other. This expanding network of Give It Backers continues to grow, each working to move beyond the symbolic in order to enact material decolonial changes. I know what you're thinking. The idea of land back can feel unsettling and overwhelming. It's a confusing, complicated, and largely unprecedented process. Plus, let's be realistic. It took over 500 years to dispossess Indigenous people of their lands in North America. Does that mean it'll take 500 years to give it back? In a time where the future appears bleak or non-existent, giving it back offers a bright path forward, a way for us to survive an apocalypse together. Because belief in the inevitability of manifest destiny has brought us our contemporary reality. And belief in the repatriation of all Indigenous land and life will make that reality a distant memory. But what does the repatriation of all Indigenous land and life really mean? Which futures are we talking about? And what place do we all have within them? In its most conservative sense, decolonization is a reversal of roles. But we're not here for that bag. The other end of the spectrum presents more liberatory pathways to borderless, propertyless, nationless imaginings. It's not about kicking everyone out of what's currently called America. It's about forging new forms of kinship and reciprocity that are centered on the land and its original inhabitants, all the while calling everyone into that process. The landmass here is enormous, and its ecological capacity to sustain life is immense if we care for these resources correctly. Decolonization is about native sovereignty and self-determination, but it's also, simultaneously, it's about the earth and all of us sustaining, caring for, and living together symbiotically. So join us in forming a we, so we can dream and organize, conjure and enact the beginning of a future of reparation, a future of repatriation, a future where our locations and labors are more than just who we are to the settler or who they are to us. A future where all indigenous land and life has been repatriated, including the occupied lands and peoples of Palestine. A future where the carceral state has been abolished. An inevitable future if there's going to be one at all. You can have a place. But first thing first, give it back.
was kind of hoping that would never end, so my turn wouldn't come up. Hi, everyone. My name, let's start a timer to respect the time. Timer, okay. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. My name is Tuazon, and I am coming to you live from Chicago. And my contribution to today's panel is to think about a proposition of art and art production with ecological imperative, and with that as to give a little permission. Sorry, caught a feeling there. A little permission for a little epistemic disobedience. And to aid in that, let's just start. There's two images that are not my works, but some of the things that I thought about in terms of how it impacts practice today. So with that, I have this a simple tea bag. It's one of the oldest commodities we know. And in order for a commodity to occur, it has to provide a stable and similar product to you each time you purchase it, right? So what the commodification process actually does is to make common that which is complex. And what is complex is what's erased from this tea bag. The systems of ecology, the land that this comes from, the way the plant participates in the larger flora and fauna of that land, the system economy of all the laborers and people involved in the making and distribution of this product to you. So the commodification process erases. It makes common that which is complex. So with the topic of our talk today, human traces, this is what we're left with because the natural traces have been erased. And with that, the next thing that I want to show you is this plastic conglomerates, which was exhibited as a collection by Kelly Jasbach. And this is very interesting because this is the opposite. This is natural processes working on human commodities. So what you're seeing there is the tops of the oil barrel bins. On the left, where you're seeing something like a noodle, those are plastics that probably went through like some volcanic and extrusion process. And that is plastic being extruded. On the right-hand side, you see your left-hand side, my right-hand side, you see plastic rope from the fishing industry and compressed plastics. And so basically what we're seeing here is human waste being naturally processed and melding with coral and sediment to kind of create a new category of rock. So this is a human trace on our geological record. Plastic conglomerates was named by Patricia Corcoran, who's a biologist. And here's the epistemically disobedient biologist who essentially worked with Kelly Jasbach, the artist, because in a way, this is what artists can do, right? It's a visual game. It operates on visuality. And so artists are able to present new material to give us an updated image of our current reality, right? So Kelly Jasbach did that classic ready-made move of moving this into the gallery. But if Patricia Corcoran had never done that, this would have taken years to be peer-reviewed, and this discovery would have been held back from public understanding for a really long time. So Patricia Corcoran was disobedient of the episteme that she's part of, leaving the space of biology and entering that of the realm of in the field of art, right? So with that, I started to think about it is possible that the garbage dump is the new lumberyard. If I began my conversation with you with the commodification process, it's so strange because the status of an object as a commodity is so short. And yet it is the thing that we permanently think about, right? So erased is the natural history of it. And erased is its afterlife when we take an object in its kind of like used up state and decide to follow the instruction to waste and dispense of it. And so I started to think about, well, the commodity is the rich version. It's the rich cousin of the sculptor, the sculpture. The sculpture does what the common commodity, it reverses what the common commodity does, which is to put back in the very complexity that was erased from the history of the object, right? So I thought, whoa, let's blow our minds away. How do we think about something like a documentary sculpture? How can an object sort of retain its extended lifespan? And how can we do it so that we as artists can sort of extend the lifespan of things and begin to think about the landfill, which, as it happens, the beginning and end point of extraction and disposal can now be closed as a loop, right? So with this, I started to think about 5 techniques of material invention, and they're listed over there. The top one is newswood. The type of technique that is reconfigured. Those are individual sheets of newspaper that are rolled until they create a nice thick log, and then they are milled. And the beauty of it is that once you start milling it and cutting across, you'll see like language being cut through, right? And sculptors get that possibility. It's not just about language for sculptors, because we give material evidence to all those abstract ideas. The next technique is the one on your, what appears to be bowls. Those are coffee grounds. Just think about, Boston and the amount of coffee grounds that are produced on a daily level. Coffee grounds are densified to mix with milk glue. It's a milk protein glue, and it's new clay. Then the next piece next to it is what looks galactical, is disposable one-time use plastics shredded and then repressed and transformed into sheet plastic. The thing that I love the most is a secondary use design. That concept came in the 1970s with a world bottled brick. But basically, secondary use design means it has a first use as a bottle and a secondary use as a buildable brick, and so it never enters the waste stream. So a complete life cycle for that one. And then the last is bacteria bricks. When you cultivate, you use natural processes to grow materials. And so there's an architect that figured out the bacteria that they're going to use to grow cement bricks, and it lowers CO2 emissions because it's a natural process. And so with that being said, I started to use that as a strategy to sort of update the kind of language that we have for material use. And so I started to create something called a test site. That language comes from the military. It's also used by Mike Reynolds, who says, if artists and architects are not going to participate in the meaningfulness of the practical, then we're basically disenchanting ourselves from the world that we're living in. And also it possibly will mean that we will never participate in the production of propositions and solutions, right? So with that, I decided that I would work on 5 test sites. I'm on test site number 3. This is test site number 1, that's called Sum. And each test site begins with a question. And so in this one, the question was, how much of the 109 tons of waste each and every one of us will produce in our lifetime can be reabsorbed in the material rebuilding of our current needs? And so in this, you'll see all of those things that I just talked to you about. They participate in the installation of the work. And then I'm not going to get into my future fossils, but it was inspired by the plastic conglomerates. And then that exhibition as platform essentially asks audience members to divert their waste plastics and sort them, clean them, wash them, and then donate them. And that is what we use in the duration of the exhibition to shred and make panels that change the exhibition. The next one that I did was at the Hammer Museum that just closed in January. I basically tried to make beautiful that which is your recycling corner of your house. And I created an entire structure using the water bricks. They're reusable, they're always there. It has to do with the sustainability of practice. So I always have these materials. So I have subverted the need to purchase new material and figured out a reusable material for myself. The thing that I'm proud of most with this installation is that you could build with a water brick and produce all these kind of great structures. But I have designed steel hardware so that you can get really funky dory, and it's not supposed to suspend like that, but there is hardware that was designed specifically so you can extend the possibility of architectural design. Present in this exhibition is the shredder, and of course we did a hackathon. I connected with Precious Plastics LA, Armando Ochoa, who's part of One Plastic Life. I always partner with organizations, nonprofits, and individuals who conduct this. When we think about climate change, we can also think about that we could be the change agents of that term. And so there is absolutely a desire for me to create new conventions for practices that are not yet in place, right? So the act of kind of depositing that bottle sort of initiates that action. Susie Gablick has this idea that it is not enough for artists and philosophers to present ideas, that it is also their job to present experiences in which those ideas can take root in the consciousness. And I love that. So these spaces are really meant to be occupied and for you to sort of perform the action that will cause that belief, right? That's the hope. So there's plastic bins that you can see that are sorting the plastics. Okay. And then there's other spaces for the future fossils and other reconfigured panels that are techniques. And then this is the last part. Perfect timing. So I am also going to be presenting work with curator Pedro Alonso for the Boston Triennial opening this May, and with Adam. And the work that I'm gonna present to you, the work that I proposed. This is the 15th century Renaissance painting that is used as a reference. The Studiolo, we know that the predecessor to the museum is the Cabinet of Curiosities, the Kunsthammer. And I want to propose, actually, this is an even earlier precedent to the Kunsthammer. The Studiolo was essentially a study for a philosopher or a priest. But then, of course, there are objects in there that shows the network of associations that that intellectual has to a larger society. And so what was once private, I now want to kind of bring out as a public space. And what would it look like for public art to actually be a space that you enter and occupy and use and reflect on your needs? So the proposal for this one is, what can those monuments look like if it actually address the needs of the local community? And so the studio is designed, and it does have organizing shelves in there because it appears like a minimal installation, but what's gonna move in is book sales, clothing trades, and also a cooking class and stuff. So this is a civic space for residents at Mattapan to occupy. So I'm currently in discussion with Green Roots, Mattapan Food and Fitness, to do a dance party, and then also the Urban Farming Institute. So the proposal here is we're kind of at a state of being very antisocial. And so one of the things that we should prepare for is to have stakes in each other's survival, right? Art is a conventional game, actually, but one of the things that's also a convention of the art is that we are expected to break the rules, right? And so in that, we move from art and into science, social work, and into other kinds of disciplines in order to kind of rebuild this necessary resilience that we will need. And one of art's convention is to produce art with intuition, subjective intuition. And I started to think, well, in terms of this ecological imperative, what would it look like if we made art for the instinct of survival? Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Nida Sinnokrot, and very happy to be here. Welcome. It's absolutely incredible to be with Lan and Adam. Amazing work. So thank you both for everything you're doing. I'm going to start just by listening. Okay, so feel free to close your eyes.
دخلتني البيت أعطتني جراب دافية ولا تضلك حافية ولا تضلك حافية يا دخلتني البيت أعطتني جرابات دافية ولا تضلك حافية حافية دخلتني البيت أعطتني جرابات دافية ولا تضلك حافية ودشداشتي عكتافك لافية 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 دخلتني البيت.
So, does anybody know what this is? Or can anybody recognize what that song might have been? It was in Arabic, right?
Something about home and life?
Home and life, yeah. Anyone else? It's a call for rain. It's like a rain dance. It's it's not unusual that you would know because this is completely speculative. This was a call for rain written by one of our artists in residence, Bint Mbareh. The name of the composition is Lentil Soup as an Antidote for Wildfires. And Bint Mbareh recorded sounds from the environment at Sakia. This afternoon, my partner Sahar Kouasmi will give a presentation on Sakia Art, Science, Agriculture, this art residency program in the West Bank that we established several years ago. And part of which Bint Mbareh was doing was responding to one of our open calls called Ephemeral Infrastructures. And the idea here is that how can we bring artistic methodologies to address the divide between art and agriculture through addressing practical needs of the community with which we work in the West Bank. So in the West Bank, scarecrows are illegal. They're not permissible to erect for a number of reasons. And this is a huge impediment to establishing small-scale farming, food security, and bringing women who traditionally work the land back into these fields. The wild boar are a real increasing threatening presence. And so what do you do if you can't have fences? This is what we did. Made a sonic scarecrow. The idea here is that not only are we able to play sounds that repel the boar at specific points of the harvest, and those sounds include different types of dog barks from the local Canaan breed of dog, thunderous sounds, etc. But at the end of the harvest, you can also play sounds that welcome the rain and welcome the boar back into the field to till the land for you. So we're really playing with complicating these ideas around what a garden is, what an enclosure is, and how sharing and hosting can become a new and active mythology to address some of these urgent concerns that we face. One of the aspects of climate change and extremism as it affects all aspects of our modern life is the loss of language, and with that the loss of mythology. We lose about one language every 10 days from the face of the earth, and with that you lose an entire cosmology, entire way of being able to relate, not just to one another, but to the land and interspecies cohabitation. So in this piece, both of these pieces, the Sonic Scarecrow, this piece, and maybe the next one, by the way, were shown in 2023, 22? It's always good to have notes. Recalling Recollection from In the Eddy of the Stream. This was an exhibition between Sakya and cooking sections in the Royal Botanic Gardens. So back in the 30s, there was a list of seeds that were outlawed during the mandate period, British mandate period in Palestine. You know, there were posters that would actually be circulated among farmers so that they would eliminate these seeds, and the British produced pesticides specifically for these. And with that, the whole story of, fertilizer and, the arms industry, it's, all deeply intertwined. And those specimens, those outlawed plants, are actually in Edinburgh, in the Royal Botanic Garden. So we were able to find all 33 specimens and put them on display together for the first time, and really, rewild, if you will, the archive. And the way we did this is that we spent a lot of time touring Palestine, interviewing elders, getting information about those plants, their medicinal properties, culinary properties, the types of pollen they produce. And from that, we understood all the different tastes of honeys that have disappeared, for example, from some of these plants. And how some of these plants are tubers that penetrate deep and allow the earth to absorb rainfall, and many of them are nitrogen fixers. Incredibly important. So these plants are replaced by nitrogen fertilizers in this kind of modernist paradigm, modernist mythology. And so what Sahar and I did is we collected these stories. We found, in the basement of the Ministry of Finance, there was an old safe that they opened for us, and we found all of these old stamps from Palestine that featured either women farmers or different types of plants, and we repatriated them. Now these stories are now part of the actual archive, part of the classification system. Here are the names of those plants that were outlawed. And if you look at the architecture, at the top you see this crown molding, which is always this idealized version of nature, like the fig and, the oak leaf or the grape, etc. And so what we did here is we took every one of these weeds, so-called weeds, and we carved them in a kind of interlaced pattern, and we created floorboards for the Royal Botanic Garden. And one of the, when we installed this, the curators were like, "Can you raise them up off the ground? It's really hard to look at them." And I said, "No, you have to get down on your hands and knees." Yes. So this was. All right. So I'm gonna backtrack a little bit. So this is Sakya, Art, Science, Agriculture. This is the location where we are. We have two of the holiest and oldest trees in Palestine, a holy shrine of a Sufi, Abu al-Ainain, father of eyes or father of springs, and the holy water spring of al-Ainain. And we'll talk about al-Ainain in a little bit. This is the holy cacao tree next to the shrine of Abu al-Ainain. And this is al-Ainain spring. This is before we started renovating. This is a class from MIT that was actually on site. We engage in farming, traditional methods of repair, using only things from the site. So we make our own mortars, etc. We're totally off grid, and we have educational programs, and these are examples of ephemeral infrastructures that we co-create with my class here at MIT and some of the students here and students at Birzeit University. And this is very low-tech, in collaboration with this craftsman in Hebron, low-tech ways to create cooling devices and devices that suck water from the atmosphere. You know, the Jewish scholar Maimonides in, I think, the 11th century has a report, it's rather anecdotal, of there being water towers, these huge structures in Jericho, the oldest and hottest and lowest place in the world, that could suck moisture from the air enough to irrigate crops. And no one's ever really been able to reproduce these, although in the 60s it was kind of a competition, and actually one French scientist kind of lost his mind, like trying to dedicate his life to doing this, and he only gathered, I think, 12 liters of water, and he was like very disappointed. So that's not the goal here. The goal here isn't the quantity, but it's to enchant and to show how with very low tech and ingenious methods of, if you can see down here, how the way we throw the pots makes the air circulate in very specific ways, increasing its volume as the apertures get smaller, and it just makes condensation in small amounts. We also host artists in residence. This is Juman Emil Aboud, who did a great deal of research on al-Ainain and the water spirits in Palestine. And they featured in their work in Document 15. Byron Kalomas, who made this really beautiful kind of seesaw for the children at Sakya, where when you pull, you're actually lifting the other person's weight, kind of complicating these relationships. Samia Halabi, the preeminent Palestinian artist, was the first artist in residence who created amazing work out of pigments just derived from beeswax and different types of soil. And of course, what we do is we then publish, we collect in the winter, our time off. We kind of, at the same time as preserving food and knowledge, we harvest the information, publish books for the summer school program. And there you can see the summer school programs, some of our symposia. So let's see how we're doing on time. Okay, a couple of minutes. So infrastructure is art. So what we do in kind of deriving a lot of inspiration from the land itself here is we started to think about the spirits that inhabit the trees and the springs and the site of Sakya in general. If you recall, the first picture I showed you, all the hills in the background are barren. There are no trees. All the trees have been cut. But that one band of green at Sakya is there because of the jinn, because of the spirit world that is still present in people's imagination. So that's part of our artistic methodology. How can we not just think about sustainable technologies, but sustainable mythologies as well? Incredibly important component of kind of reimagining new ecologies and futures. But what if there's, because of pesticides, epistemicides, and we've forgotten all these kind of stories and cosmologies? How do you resurrect them? Can you resurrect them? Can you bring them back? So Dr. Tawfiq Kanaan, in the 20s, he was a physician, he actually gave his medical practice to Palestinian peasants in exchange for their amulets, which were often, pre-Islamic in the notations and incantations and magic contained within them. He didn't take them, he would just reproduce them, right? And It became part of the Henry Wellcome Museum in the UK, and recently, in the last, I think, 15 years, it was repatriated to the Beerzeit Museum. And it's very interesting the way these objects are collected and their symbolism and how different materials brought together can resonate in different ways. And so we were like, okay, well, maybe this is a type of infrastructure. He classified that spirit world as the hellish and the heavenly and the earthly, and then we derived from that above ground, ground, and below ground in order to address different type of infrastructural strata. This is a show that kind of puts some of these ideas on display theatrically at the Sharjah Biennial, which is currently up. And what we did is we kind of reproduced a little bit of Sakya and some of these ideas in the old Jebel market, which has been closed down. And so the poems here are written by one of our artists in residence. It's kind of invoking different calls of water, and they were collectively sewn with the women and children of Ankinia. And then you see all of these kind of mythical creatures, which I call water witnesses and water goddesses, that are kind of material manifestations of that spirit world. And Imelainen, who inspires this show. The show is actually dedicated to Imelainen, or Mother of Springs. And you can see all these little creatures kind of on this slightly elevated platform moving towards these banners. These banners are traditionally called ziyarat, and that was part of the tradition of going on pilgrimage from one holy site to another holy site. It's a very interesting story and how that tradition became co-opted by authoritarian and governmental structures and kind of taken away from the practice of women leading this matriarchal kind of pilgrimage. And these are all made out of found objects, some of them cast in bronze and copper. A lot of them are empty vessels that kind of resonate with the sounds of wind, as you can imagine them being installed in sight, and little ones that are hiding behind the shuttered windows, looking out. This is a beautiful little video about Sakya from another artist in residence, Sharu Harb. It's called "In the Presence of Absence," which we installed just underneath the door. What you see in the video there is a shot of the holy boulder at Sakya. The boulder is called Sabah al-Khair, or the Good Morning Boulder. And in the back of everything, there's this chicken coop. It's called Capital Coop, CAPTALCOUP. And again, this is a type of infrastructure at Sakya, like the scarecrow and like everything else that we have. This coop, this chicken coop, is built like, you might, if you squint your eyes, see the Capitol building or some kind of, structure of authority. But the floor is completely unmoored. So all of those little magical creatures you saw are on the floor of the Capitol coop. It's as if they've kind of left this kind of certain type of mythology of security, and they're moving towards this speculative one that we are in the process of figuring out still. This coop is also accompanied by a series of drawings and plans so that anybody can make them. They're all, despite the complexity, everything is made with straight cuts. Very simple. You need one saw, and all of the wood is the absolute cheapest wood you can buy in the market. And 2 layers of chicken wire in order to create a kind of a moire effect that kind of, implicates, vision, illusion, the whole kind of idea of a wireframe and architectural drawing, or exploded views as well. And at the back behind it is this other witness or goddess with a slightly more sinister feel. And this is the Tes, or the big black goat on our site. With many of them use these bullhorns, the kind that you amplify your voice with. Imelainen, our central goddess. Many of them are wrapped in nylon stocking. Little witnesses. ceramics involved. You know, these are industrial water pipes used, in what you call pressure valve release stations. And everywhere in Palestine you see them outside, but they're fenced. You can't access the water. Bedouin have a big problem with that. And so here we're kind of repurposing these materials and thrashing them together, attaching them in kind of ways that we use at Sakya in our kind of low-tech sensibility. And many of them have eyes that are either drains or Palestinian handmade ceramics. And of course we have this recurring theme of the pickaxe that we have forged and bent the blades upwards as a type of kind of refusal or invitation to think of our relationship with land and digging and extraction in different ways. I think that's my time, so thank you very much.
Thank you all for being the best panel of the day so far. That was great. A really wonderful mixture of type of ways that we work, and given the ways that you all work so expansively, it's so hard to condense ideas like that. But really brilliant, just remarks in every way. So thank you. And I loved what you were saying not long about. At the start of your remarks, this idea of how to make common what is complex, and I think you all work oppositely. Like you make complex that which feels common, that which is very easy to say the word sustainability, you breeze by it and maybe roll your eyes, but actually in each of your work, the ways you see the world is a very different way of thinking about what sustainability could mean, what climate change can mean, and in fact, very often at odds with what is more often fed in those terms. I just was also so interested in how you deal with the practical and the enchanted. So you both, all three of you talk about this need to work through ideas of survival, ideas of infrastructure, of waste, of dispossession of land, how you practically address these crises. And then you also all move into that speculative, enchanted realm as artists. And so I just wondered if you could maybe just talk about that a little more openly as artists yourselves, as practitioners, as educators, what it means to try to balance those things together.
Not everyone at once.
I know, it's tricky.
I can speak briefly on it in terms of New Red Order's perspective. I feel like there's a kind of dialectic or polarity of these two kind of competing ways of thinking. One is Eve Tuck and Kei Wen Yang's decolonization is not a metaphor. Mm-hmm. That things like land acknowledgement could actually guarantee settler futurity by acknowledging without acting or changing, and that to do anything decolonial would have to be kind of inherently against the law to undermine notions of property and promote self-determination and sovereignty, and that it would have to be political material change, basically.
Yeah.
So that's one extreme, and then there's this guy, Christopher Bracken, who wrote this book, Recourse to Savage Philosophy, Magical Criticism. Ooh. And he has this idea about savage philosophy, that discourse deploys forces, and this kind of arguing that kind of thinking has been racialized and therefore kind of pushed to the side, even though it's something everyone all over the world does. Huh. Freud is a magical thinker that has ramifications that ripple out.
Amazing.
In the same way that a shaman or a spiritual person from an indigenous community could be, and that he's trying to collapse those things.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the other pole.
Yeah.
And the two things are kind of incommensurable. You can't fold them into each other.
Yeah.
But between that tension, I find that there's a way for us as artists to interact with the world.
Yeah.
By trying to hold the real and the unreal together.
Yeah. That's amazing. I want to read all those references. Alon, I don't know if you have thoughts to add to that.
Yeah, I think when I was a young student of art, I went to the Met, and I don't remember which museum it was, and I went to the section that had Filipino art objects. And I'd realized I had walked away from the contemporary site of the museum and sort of walked myself back in time. And then the objects that they had there were artifacts. And it occurred to me that kind of dichotomy between art and artifacts, right? Culturally speaking, there's a lot of non-Western cultures that think about art objects as participation in their daily life, right? And the Western art object is an object that you don't use. It sits and is separated away in a cold room. And one of the things I realized was like, oh, I'm not allowed to be contemporary then. You know, I've sort of been written, and I had two choices. I could follow the conventions of aesthetics, or I could sort of think about like the kind of Filipino cosmology and its relationship to art and the world. And I started to think about how artifacts themselves could sort of be extremely, it's just so weird. Like I think about it like, first we designed a phone, and then you hand the phone to a child, and now the phone is designing the child, right? Yeah. So, when you're in the realm of thinking about artifacts, you definitely think in the realm of how objects make subjects, and there's a kind of co-constitution of that. And so this is the way I arrived at the meaningfulness of the practical, is that the object itself could sort of show us what kind of subjects we can be. And I started to think about sculpture along those terms as well.
I don't know if there's anything to add. I mean, that is absolutely, I mean, it's, I think enchantment is actually quite pedestrian.
You think what?
It's quite pedestrian. It is commonplace. What takes a lot of effort is to become disenchanted, in fact. And that's their current condition. Yeah. Exactly as you've described. And there are these, invisible infrastructures that create thresholds and gates that you must, gain access to somehow. But I find that, every story, any moment you can slow down and listen and take a pause, you will be. It's still there. It's still in our bodies. To this kind of magic. It was we simply at Saka we just need to create the space for it, and that's why I think your monument pieces. So beautiful, resonates so deeply with me, and so creating a spatial practice and a temporal practice, I think, and what we call like an acoustic practice, an acoustic ecology, I think just allows these amazing spirits to surface.
Yeah, and especially thinking that word infrastructure, which again, has that sort of commonplace sort of ready, something that you understand but don't think a lot about, for sure comes into play with how, especially Lon, you're thinking of the installations like that you did at the Hammer that themselves use the infrastructure of a museum essentially to bring to light circulation of systems and recycling and the material we live with every day and kind of elevating that too. So all those things kind of knit together so elegantly. Adam and Nida, you are both filmmakers too, and last night at dinner you were both kind of riffing off the importance of filmmaking, your origin stories of filmmaking. So I just wondered if you could just share, remind, or tell us more about the audience just in terms of what it means to be a filmmaker in the realm of thinking about land and climate as well, how that plays together.
Yeah.
That's a weird question. That's a weird, I don't know where I got that, but I was trying to bring in that connection between you, actually. Because what you talked about, Nida, is not the film, the realm of film necessarily.
Film has a time and place.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think a lot of our time, our practice bounces between installation and single-channel film.
Yeah.
Because they both have their advantages. Like, the beauty of an installation is to be able to give the audience enough agency to navigate it.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, a film screening's like, look at my shit for an hour and a half. You know what I mean? Like, captive.
Yeah.
And both have their advantages. And I think, like, I don't know, we talked about Craig Baldwin. if that's okay.
We talked about Craig Baldwin's eating habits in the studio.
But I could riff on Craig for a second and like
Go
this sort
for
of
it.
like situation,
Yeah.
his lineage.
We
and
both have a
Vermont
bard
and
background, yeah.
Yeah.
This idea of like speaking back against the monolith of media or appropriating it.
Yeah.
Or like doing slight things to take on the authority of advertising in order to slip into a vernacular,
Right.
which could be understood,
Yeah.
or that exists outside of politics or activism, so that way it can kind of Trojan horse its way
Yeah.
into a new reality. And that's part of like the Give It Back thing. There was a public advertising campaign, and that's because when we first presented this project, people thought we made all these situations up, these instances up, even though these are real people doing it.
Yes.
And like we're playing with that line of unreality or trying to
Yes.
commit crimes against reality.
Yeah.
But it was kind of disappointing that people still didn't think it was real, even
Yeah.
though we like found these people and like.
It's real.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And film is very slippery too. The idea of the documentary itself, of course, can be a thing that is very manipulated, very distorted
'cause
as
there's
well. So I think film as a language always runs that line of living between creating a reality, documenting a reality, contorting those issues. It's a bit sculptural too, so I think all of those things kind of play into maybe what you're talking about.